Hello, this is Stan Dubin, and welcome to the Hiring Tips Podcast. Today, our tip is going to be a little different. We're going to have a guest on, and her name is Suzanne Kelly. Suzanne works with leaders, management teams, and entrepreneurs to help them bring the best possible people on board. She's been doing this for over 2 decades, and I'm happy she'll give us some time today to discuss how she goes about doing this. Hello, Suzanne.
Hi, Stan. Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. So we're gonna cover a few topics in this show today, and let's get right at it. Question: what do you see as the main reason, Suzanne, for hiring mistakes?
I would say the main reason is settling on a candidate due to a sense of urgency to get a seat filled. That really would be the main reason.
Okay. And anything more you'd like to say on that?
Yeah, so what happens is oftentimes, and I'm sure you can relate to this, hiring professionals are in reactive mode. They have a sense of urgency to get a seat filled, and they end up settling on candidates. And to go a little bit deeper with that, if they're not aligned with the best recruiters, depending on who is sourcing their talent pool, if they don't have the right people in place, they very well end up selecting the best of the worst candidates.
Right. Okay.
And that's really that's I would say, from my experience, has been the number one cause of a bad hire.
Okay. So what would you say is in terms of a bad hire, what would you say is the average cost to an organization of a bad hire?
I tried to wrap my head around the cost of a bad hire. I've been studying that for quite a long time. And I reached out to Randy Street, who's one of the principals of GH Smart, a couple of years ago, to ask him. And they're really the top in their field when it comes to they're management consultants in the area of hiring. They have a process called top grading. And they also wrote a book called Who. And so I reached out to Randy to ask him, because I had been reading, a lot of it was 3 to 4 times the cost of the base salary. And Randy sent me very graciously shared a lot of data with me. And I actually don't think that there's anyone out there that's collected more data on the costs of hiring mistakes than GH Smart. And as an example, a $100,000 hire ends up costing almost 15 times that. And the bulk of the cost, so about 3 to 4 times that, are hard costs. So it's the salary, the benefits, the termination costs, all of that. The bulk of it is the opportunity loss. So when the job isn't getting done, it could be other employees quitting. It could be a lost customer. And the problem with the opportunity loss is it makes a bad hire a silent killer because it doesn't show up on the financials. So I think of opportunity loss as the carbon monoxide of a hiring mistake.
Right. And I know I'm very familiar with the term called lost income. And lost income is the income that you didn't make from a project that you could have made, and that income is lost because let's just take this example of a bad hire, and let's say this individual is tasked to do X, Y, and Z, and they don't even come close to X, Y, and Z, and the company was depending on that in order to make a certain income amount as a result of that project. And then that bad hire, the phrase that we're using, so that income didn't get made, and it's lost, and it's really truly lost because that's it. You don't get a second chance with that time period to make that income.
That's precisely That is precisely right. And I think part of the problem is a lot of companies aren't measuring the costs of a bad hire. So I don't even think they're thinking about this opportunity loss, which is it can really be crippling. And as I said, it doesn't show up. So it's not like it's on the forefront.
Right. And many of the clients that I work with have another way of measuring or experiencing a bad hire. And it really is the impact, the emotional impact, the social impact of that individual on the employees around them, on perhaps their supervisor or supervisor. And then in small businesses, small companies, on the owner, him or herself. And that is, it's certainly not easy to measure, but it can be quite an impact, a negative impact. So much so that employees around somebody who look really great on their resume, sounded fantastic in the interview, and then the person gets hired, and then a few months down the line, or a few weeks, or even a few years down the road, but more so it's going to show up in a few months. But that person is sort of rubbing others the wrong way on a fairly regular basis, or in some way or shape or form, they are eroding the confidence and the productivity of others around them. And so much so that if and when that person moves on, whether they decide to move on themselves or they're actually let go, the amount of relief that is experienced by those that say, "Oh my God!" I mean, some of them will actually feel like, "Oh, I can really get to work now." The environment can be that toxic, that I don't know if the right word, if it's too strong a word to use the word poison, but in some cases, a bad hire will really reduce the productivity of the staff around them.
It's not too strong a word, because that's exactly what it is in many cases. I have one CEO of a company who actually kept a bad hire on for nearly 10 years. And after that bad hire was finally terminated, they had to bring in a grief counselor to help the employees deal with the aftermath that toxic person had on them over that period of time.
Wow.
Bad hires are really the single greatest mistake any company can make, and they have a tremendous ripple effect at pretty much every touch point. And the other thing too is what I've learned is that the average number of hours spent, and this was after polling 500 people, the average number of hours spent dealing with a bad hire is about 150.
Wow. Well, that does move us on to the next question. So how do you ensure the employer is making the best hiring decision?
I think that the most valuable component of a hiring process, and the most shockingly underutilized, is the reference check. Because you never know whether someone is who you think they are.
Right. And as I've learned about you, you were pretty much the queen of reference checks.
I think I am.
So give the listeners a little bit more, and we're going to be talking about reference checks in greater detail in the next show. We're going to have Suzanne on for 3 shows, and I'm not sure if it's the next one or the last one, but she's going to be going into reference checks in great detail. And it's just astonishing what she has sort of carved out as a way of really getting superb, in-depth, thorough, and not necessarily time-consuming reference checks that will give you so much more information. And as my listeners know, the premise of the Employee Testing Center is, and if it's almost a slogan, the more you know about somebody before you hire them, the better your hiring decision will be. And a lot of the tips that come through the podcast and our newsletter are really just that, how you can find out more about them. So I'm fascinated to hear more from you as to how, and we can go into more depth, in the next show or the show after, but I'd love to hear how you do more in-depth reference checks.
Sure. I also want to add on to something that you just said. The more you know about someone before the hire, the better off you are. I say that the investment of time on the front end of a hiring process can save millions on the back end. And you just don't know whether that person that you've interviewed will be the same person who shows up after you hire them. And I really think that the reference check is the best way to find out if someone is really who you think they are and who you need them to be successful in the role. The problem with reference checking is that it's fundamentally broken. I call it the elephant in the hiring process. And the reason it's fundamentally broken is because it's typically treated, and I can't even recall anybody who I've seen through all the years that I've been in this business who really invests the time to do, and I'm not saying that they don't exist, I'm just saying that I haven't seen it, to really do a thorough and well-performed reference check. So the reason it's broken, in my opinion, is because it's treated as a check the box. So it's typically done after the decision to hire has been made. And I think you can relate to this, Stan. When someone is psychologically invested, it's almost like they don't want to hear it. It's like the honeymoon stage of dating. You so want to believe that that person is who you want them to be, that you believe that that's who you choose to believe that that's who they are. So conducting a reference check after a decision to hire has been made is really a waste of time. So that's problem number one. The other problem is that most people think that, you can't reference check. First of all, candidates are only going to give you the names of individuals who are going to sing their praises, who are going to say good things. And what I say is, why would you accept those names? It's really important to decide who you want to talk to and who does it make the most sense to speak with. And this can all be uncovered during an interview. That's the best time to start collecting the names of references while you're interviewing a candidate, because so much can be uncovered during that period. And you also have a golden opportunity to gauge body language. So that stigma that people have about, they're only going to be the names of the people that you can only call the people that the candidates give you, just isn't accurate. So it's really important for companies to get in the driver's seat of the process and not the other way around. If it's delegated to someone who really hasn't earned the right to reference check and who doesn't have a good handle on the vision and the culture and the personalities and the whole interview process, and understand what's really most important for this person to be successful in not only the role, but the culture of the organization, it doesn't make sense. You've got to have the right person driving it. And you've got to have someone who has a capacity to make people feel comfortable and has emotional intelligence to get people. We only have a couple of seconds to make an impression on someone. And that goes for references. So when you're calling them, it's really important to approach them in the best possible manner. So those are a couple of the things that I would say up on the front end in terms of why reference checking is fundamentally broken in most companies, or it's skipped altogether.
Right. And it brings us back to, or brings me back to this idea of this notion of, guy's got a good-looking resume, interview goes well, maybe the applicant is well drilled in all the different possible questions that he or she might be asked. and they're glowing. Things look great, sound great, and my clients, a good number of them will easily and quickly tell you that they've gone through that process, hired somebody that they thought was going to just be a fantastic fit, a fantastic match, and then a few weeks or so down the line, they're gone, or they had to let them go because they really weren't the same person that they interviewed. And it's not like, I mean, it is to some degree that they were fooled, but this thing about reference checks, and I want you guys that are listening to this to know, this area, which we're going to go into in more depth in another show, this method or this approach to gaining more really quality information about prospective employees, this approach really can be done without, a tremendous amount or tremendous investment in time. And if you get good at it, the amount of information that you would get can be so much more and of such a high quality than your normal methods of, sitting down and interviewing and asking a number of great questions and, side checking a resume and so forth and so on. So we're going to look forward to talking to Suzanne some more. When you hear some of the ways that she's able to get people to talk to her, find out the right people to talk to, go over some of the points about whether it's okay for these people to talk to you when you do get a reference check, because that was something that I had thought, way back when, was like, oh my goodness, who really will talk to somebody who's doing a reference check? Well, it depends to a large degree who you're talking to and who is willing to give you some information about your applicant, and not necessarily, as Suzanne said earlier, not necessarily those 3 people that they put on the resume. They would be complete idiots to put 3 people that they didn't know for fairly certain are going to sing their praises. Well, fine. Let's hear their praises, but let's find out from folks who may not be singing their praises and see if there's an Achilles heel that they'll communicate about your applicant. And if that's an okay piece of information for you to have and to move forward and hire that person, well, the beauty of that is that going in that Achilles heel is there. So anyway, that'll be it for today. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
We'll check in with you again for the next show. And goodbye for now. Thank you for listening. In addition to our podcast, we have a service that will help you hire honest, trustworthy, and dependable staff. Watch our 3-minute video at thetestingservice.com. Once again, that's thetestingservice.com.